The great E.Y. Harburg, who is a controversial and provocative lyricist, once said that words make you think a thought. It's an incredible realization that certain words will make you feel and think certain things that perhaps you don't want to, perhaps we've been conditioned to stay away from. And so when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez used the phrase concentration camp to describe what the United States government is doing to asylum seekers on the southern border, and the larger, seemingly fascist decisions that the Trump administration is making over and over against migrant families, terrorizing them with the threat of deportation, and then rescinding it a few seconds or moments later only to revisit it soon again. One of the things that became clear is that the Jewish community is so sensitive and traumatized around certain terms that the reality that Ocasio-Cortez pointed to was impossible to see and identify because the words were so triggering. And it's clear, actually, that she not only um, didn't predict and didn't truly understand the depth of Jewish trauma when it comes to the phrase concentration camp, which is very, very upsetting. It is also clear that the Jewish community can't differentiate in a calm way, and who could, between a concentration camp and extermination camp, and identifying the deep problematics of abandoning children to sleep on cement in in compounds. We have a hard time identifying the pain of the world when it is identified by an outsider with our primal pain. When we do that ourselves, it also causes enormous challenge. I'll give you one very interesting example. In the 1980s, the conservative movement of Judaism tried to create a statement of its own ideas, its own principles. It was going to be called ultimately Emet Ve'emunah, and it was chaired by Rabbi Robert Gordis, himself a very provocative public figure in the American scene, not only in the conservative movement. So the commission that came together created something called Emet Ve'emunah, and I'm holding the red version of the statement of principles that came out. Afterwards, a blue version became available. Why are there two versions? Because of one sentence that appeared in this red original version. I'll just read to you the sentence that was just not palatable for a very sensitive and traumatized part of the American Jewish community. It's called the problem of evil. The existence of evil has always provided the most serious impediment to faith. Given the enormity of the horror represented by Auschwitz and Hiroshima, this dilemma has taken on a new terrifying reality in our generation. Immediately, there were critics who responded to the editors of this statement of principle saying, how could you put Auschwitz and Hiroshima in the same sentence? You cannot create a moral equivalence, nor is the traumatizing and extermination of our people the same as a response within war to another people. Now, I know that there's an argument there, and I know that there are deep ethical differences between what Hiroshima represents and what Auschwitz represents. So too, it's important for us to distinguish between the difference between what is happening on the southern border at the hands of the United States government and what happened to Jews and others at the hands of the Nazis. But it is also true that leaders in our community, such as Elie Wiesel and past prophets like Rabbi Mark Tannenbaum, identified what happened at the hands of the Nazis to what happened in Vietnam, what happened in Cambodia, what happens in Darfur. It is not that pains are the same, it is not that circumstances are the same, or that history should treat different marginalizations and genocides as the same, but the word genocide, which was created after the Holocaust, is a term that is now applied because of the activism of Jews who are trying to teach based on our own trauma so that there should be no suffering for any people. The only way for us to do that is to understand that the development of the Declaration of Universal Human Rights, which happened in 1948, is no less an outcome of the world's being attuned to the suffering of the Jews and trying to learn from that when it comes to the redemption and salvation of all peoples. Did Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez speak inappropriately? On the one hand, absolutely. On the other hand, can Jews dig down deeper than our own trauma to understand that the human rights abuses happening to immigrants and asylum seekers should be related to our own suffering, and therefore our reaction should not only be an inward turning based on trauma, but an outward facing. We're strong now because of what we've learned. We will not let other people suffer the fate that others let us suffer. Can we see past the words and see that reality should be much more triggering than a phrase? We've got work to do. And it's not that we should let politicians off the hook when they speak callously. It's that reality is harsher than the words that hurt.